Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position along with your favorite beverage to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Chris T., Jeff S., Paul M., Edward S., Cindy W., and Jack T. On the program today is a returning guest and one that we are pleased to have back with us. Mr. Ron Hochstein has joined us. Ron is the president and CEO of Lundin Gold. The company is operating the Tier 1 Fruta del Norte underground gold mine in southeast Ecuador, which is now producing approximately 500,000 ounces of gold per year. The company continues to be focused on expansion and operational efficiencies, while it also is conducting near-mine exploration to grow the resource base around the Fruta del Norte complex. Lundin Gold is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol LUG and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol LUGDF. Ron, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Andrew, and yeah, it's great to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you on the program, and we probably don't do this enough, but just to get some time with you is always appreciated, and I'm sure the market always enjoys hearing from you as well, and all the activities with Lundin Gold. I'd like to just kick it off here. We'll talk market stuff here in a moment, but recent operational results first. Ron posted a few weeks back. Talk about the results, the dividend increase, and of course, your outlook to finish off the year.
Just a couple of weeks ago, we announced our Q2 results. So, for Q2, we produced just over 133,000 ounces, bringing our first half to just under 245,000 ounces. Grades have been maintained. We are slightly above our resource grade, but that was as expected. The one area, and throughput also was up. We continue to try to see what we can do with the facilities we have. And so throughput was up during Q2, which obviously helped with production. But we're well on our way to meeting our proposed guidance for 2024 of 450 to 500,000 ounces. And our costs in Q2 were $875 all-in sustaining. Still, I know it puts us to one of the lowest pure gold mines operating costs per ounce sold, but still would like to see that lower. But that also puts us well on our way of within our guidance of $820 to $890 per ounce all-in sustaining costs. So, the team at site just continue to keep pushing on what we call operational excellence. How can we do things better? Pushing throughput, what we can do with recoveries, and continue to look for opportunities to reduce costs. And by doing that with the production we're seeing at Fruta and with these costs that we're at, we're generating a lot of cash flow, free cash flow. And as I think some of the listeners may know, we really focused on cleaning up the balance sheet. So we were able to, in January of last year, announced the repayment of the gold prepay in full, which worked out really well. We had 10 quarters left on that, and we did that at a price of around $1,800 and change an ounce. So with where gold prices are now, that's been a really significant payback for our shareholders. Then late last year, we had about $72 million left in our senior debt. We paid that off. And then early this year, we announced an agreement with Newmont, who now hold the stream, to buy the stream out in full. We had the ability under the agreement with the stream to buy back 50% of it in June of this year for $150 million. But we took the opportunity, and it was really a win-win for Newmont and ourselves to buy out in full. And so as of June, we now are 100% debt-free. We made a payment of $180 million at the end of June to Newmont. We still have another payment of $150, but that now sits in accounts payable. So on the balance sheet, we have zero debt. And so in conjunction with that, we've been paying the banks all this cash here over the last, since we started up, all this money that we said, well, maybe it's time for our shareholders to enjoy a little bit more. We have been paying a dividend. We started that in 2022, paying a dividend, of 40 cents a share annually, so 10 cents per quarter. And we announced that we will now be paying a dividend. We've doubled it essentially to 80 cents a share, 20 cents a share per quarter. So that, paid down our debt, returning cash to shareholders, but we're generating with this mine and being in Ecuador with such low costs, helping us with such low costs, we're still generating a lot of cash flow to look at growth, expansion, exploration, potential M&A. There's still a lot of opportunities even after we've announced the doubling of our dividend.
Lots of good stuff there. First, congratulations. This has been absolute grand slam out of the park, for the baseball analogy out there for the audience. This plus being able to establish the dividend fairly early on and then being able to increase it here, I think speaks to just the robustness of operations. And also the fact that you guys obviously want to keep a good war chest, but at the same time, you're rewarding shareholders, you're keeping that war chest available, and probably doing it in a way, I haven't done the math recently for Lundin Gold here, but doing it in a way to where that dividend is a sustainable number. But then you also have plenty of additional things you can do with that cash to continue to grow the company and grow that production profile. So really good start here on at least the first half of the year. This fantastic results coming in. Looking forward to seeing the rest of the results come in throughout the year here as we wrap up. Let's talk more details on the company in a moment, but just I want to step back a bit and have you give your view of the current gold market conditions. Things have changed since you and I have last talked for a podcast. As far as some of those conditions, things are looking, those conditions are obviously improving for gold price on events in the world that aren't necessarily attractive events, but nonetheless, the gold price is certainly starting to move a little bit higher here, and we probably have a lot left to go on this. But just talk about how you're seeing the market now, that sentiment for mid-tiers and senior gold producers out there. If you want to give a few predictions, how you see the market behaving over the next year or so.
The gold market is so challenging, Andrew, because, if you look at copper, any other base metal, or, you got your supply and demand fundamentals are driving it, but gold just has, you can kind of look at supply and demand fundamentals and you can do a paper on that, and then you kind of crinkle that up and throw it in the waste bin, because, with gold, it's very different. As you said, there's a lot of it is risk hedge. So things that, as humankind, we don't necessarily like things going on, conflicts and wars, but as a gold producer, that people want to be able to store that value there, and so they look at gold. But I think the big thing where we're going to see, I think, some changes in the gold, and where I'm pretty positive about the future with gold, is just the whole thing with the, inflationary pressures, and starting to see, the forecast for rates starting to come down, and then also to the world moving away from being totally feeling dominated by the US dollar. I think we're starting to see in various places around the world this desire to maybe have something else other than the dollar. Now, I think a lot of countries aren't necessarily ready to start running to another currency per se, but where we're seeing it is running to gold. We've seen central banks buying of gold is at, I don't know if it's all-time highs, could be, but certainly highs than we've seen over the last several years. We're seeing investors running to gold in terms of purchasing of gold bars, coins, etc. The ETFs have seen a lot of inflows recently. It's those types of things, and typically, I think what's really good about gold is if you look historically, when interest rates have been going up, gold is going down. But gold has actually been going up because of those things I just mentioned, central bank buying, some investment purchases, things like that. So now we're at the point where we're starting to see a lot, here in Canada, we have seen interest rate cuts now for 2 quarters in a row. There's talk about potentially that happening in the United States and other parts around the world. That's really going to be strong for gold. So I think the future is great. What's interesting is we haven't actually been seeing that in the equities until recently. We're starting to now see in the big producers and the mid-size, starting to see, a lot of companies have been hitting 52-week highs now over the last several weeks. And I think some of the big ones are getting close to potentially all-time highs. We hadn't been seeing that. We'd seen this rise in gold price, but not this move to the equities. And in my opinion, there are two things for that. One is that people were still wanted to, before they start jumping into the gold production story, they really wanted to feel comfortable with gold was moving. But two, if we look at gold, costs have been going up. So even though prices were going up, margins were actually declining. And a lot of people were pointing toward Q2 of this year to actually see a reversal on that trend where especially the big producers have got their handle on costs, and we're trying to start to see some either flattening, if not reduction in costs, getting production up. And we saw that happen in Q2 with the major producers starting to talk about generating significant amounts of free cash flow. And that's what's really started to bring more investors into the market. There's still a disjoint though. The small and the developers, they're still struggling, which creates opportunities for companies like Lundin Gold and other big producers for maybe create some opportunities to look at M&A and that sort of thing. But the last little while, we've really seen a reintroduction of interest back into the senior gold producers, and I think this is just the start.
Yeah, Ron, I do think it will trickle down here as we move along, as people start to get that additional confirmation that they're expecting to see the gold price 2,600, 2,700, or whatever that confirmation is for them. I think we will see that pour in, capital will pour in, and the money will fall downhill. This isn't the best analogy, but it starts at the top of the chicken coop and it falls down into the bottom of the chicken coop. We're not talking about chicken poop, we're talking about cash. You see that, and I think the juniors will have their day in the sun. And in the meantime, it's advantageous for companies that are looking to add to pipeline and potentially look at transactions that make sense to look at that lower valued area. Because, the reality is short of bigger companies like Lundin Gold now, we can say that a lot of the seniors out there typically grow by, M&A most of the time. They don't always organically explore for new deposits in-house. Not always the case, depends on what company we talk about here. Interesting conditions, and most certainly the U.S. will change their interest rate policy, and that'll most likely start to come down here on cuts. And of course, we've seen that will incentivize the gold market even further as we move down the road towards this next phase of the economic cycle. And the U.S. tends to still lead that a little bit anyway, at least so we see. So I appreciate the comments on all that. That's very good stuff here and very good, promising environment here, despite some of the global issues we see out there that aren't so appetizing. But I'd like to move on here and just talk a little bit more here about just broadly the sector. There continue to be merger and acquisition activity out there, Ron, in the sector, most recently with Gold Fields' offer for Oseko Mining. I suspect we'll see more of this as we progress in the cycle, but what are your thoughts on the outlook for M&A and how you see this going?
The gold market needs to see it happen, Andrew. There are so many companies out there. So from an investor standpoint, I think we're going to see more of that happening. Not, as you just stated a little while, not everyone has that organic growth profile in front of them. And that's something that companies need to show, investors want to see is growth. And so I think M&A is definitely something that's going to happen. We're going to see more and more of that over the next 6-12 months. For us, we did take a shot at something. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful. more driven by the management of the target than dollars and cents. But for us, I think the key for us is flexibility. We're generating a lot of cash. We have a very supportive shareholder base in the Lundin family and Newmont. But the challenge is Fruta, as you started out, is one of the better gold assets mines in the world today, a tier one asset. It's going to be challenging for us to find something that's going to be creative. Doesn't mean that we just sit back at all. No, not at all. We are continuing, we're aggressively out there looking because there will be opportunities. And given the strength of our shareholder base, the cash flow we're generating, the team that we were able to pull together to build Fruta del Norte and access to people within the Lundin group, we're set up pretty well. We just got to make sure we're patient and look for the right opportunity. They will come. I'm sure of it.
Well, I do think they will come, and you guys have to remain frosty and selective on these things. And valuation consideration is very important here, and there's no point in getting wrapped up into something that doesn't make sense. So I appreciate you guys looking out for the proper transaction as you evaluate them. So appreciate that, and I'm sure we'll see more news on that front as things progress. Let's get back into Lundin Gold here and maybe start on the administrative and capital structure front. Give us just a brief update on where we are now. The company's debt free, but talk about that treasury cash balance, the shares outstanding as we are here now in the current position of the company, and then also just highlight some of those key shareholders on the roster.
We ended up this Q2 with free cash flow. We generated free cash flow for the 3 months of 112 million in that 3 months. And we're sitting in good shape in terms of cash on the balance sheet. Well, we anticipate ending the year, assuming gold prices stay where they are today, in the 300 million, and that's after making that second payment to Newmont of 180 million. So paying Newmont total 330 million in 2024, we'll still end up with about 300 million on the balance sheet. Again, debt free now. We're going to be generating, in the neighborhood of 100 plus million free cash flow per quarter here, assuming gold prices stay where they're at. So that we'll end the year with in excess of 300 million on the balance sheet. We got a zero debt. We are probably going to look at putting in a revolver just to have that tool in the toolkit per se, just in case something comes up, but we certainly don't need it. We got a lot of flexibility, and the key then is discipline. In terms of shareholder base, we have two strategic shareholders, the Lundin family at 27% and Newmont at 32%. Very supportive. As I mentioned, we did look at something on the M&A front. Both shareholders were fully supportive of moving on that. And, I think that's what is great for us, in that having that solid shareholder base and sharing strategy and everything going forward, that they're fully supportive of the management team, what we want to do, where we're looking at. There's obviously for us a focus on organic growth because of the limited exploration work done on a land package that has extreme exploration potential. Aurelian put this land package together in early 2000s, and hit Fruta del Norte on hole 51. So they had done some work in some areas just close to Fruta, but they found Fruta pretty quick, and then boom, focused on it. Kinross acquired it in 2008. The discovery was in 2006. And then they were really focused on Fruta, but did some surface work, but no drilling on this land package. And then we acquired it in 2014. And obviously we were focused on getting the feasibility study done and then financing construction. So we've got just phenomenal opportunities for organic growth. And I think that's where generating this cash, and it allows us to have arguably one of the largest exploration programs going on in Latin America right now around Fruta del Norte. And the ability to have the cash to build something if we're successful, which we think we're on the brink of.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in just a moment, the exploration work here. But certainly, yeah, I think what you guys have been able to do here has been good. And then, of course, the ongoing support of the key shareholders is great. And companies at a point now where there may not need to be a need to raise equity anymore, potentially, depending on what might happen on future transactions, future developments of other projects, et cetera. But very good progress here. We'll see what happens with Aradia and those
Yeah.
folks being able to do some more exploration work. What Keith Barron and the guys will be up to over there. We just actually spoke to Keith for a podcast as well, Ron. So looking forward to seeing what those guys are able to turn up this time around. On the drilling program, I'd like to talk about this because I think this is important aside from operational stuff, which we'll get back into as well in a moment. But you guys have an ongoing drill program with an estimated about 56,000 meters to be drilled out. This is already in progress, and it's happening both on the surface and underground, with various focus areas being the Bonza Sur area to the south of the FDN trend, as well as FDN East and the new discovery there, and then continuation also further depth within the mining area. So talk about some of the expectations here, Ron, and how you see this shaping up for a 2025 continuing program, of which we expect it will continue, and then how this initial exploration work fits into the size and scale, and I guess collectively the context of the company's exploration concessions, and really so much is untested, which could result in that larger upside that could potentially occur. Just talk about this and how you view this initial program and how things are going.
Yeah, no, you're really speaking, Andrew, about our Nearmine program, which, yeah, we just increased that by 10,000 meters here at Q2 to bring it up to 56,000. And that was a program that we only started in 2022, Q3 of 2022. And it's essentially focusing in and around Fruta del Norte. We've also got two other exploration programs, a regional program of 10,000 meters, which is what we originally started at in 2022, or actually 2021, was looking a little further afield. And then we said, hold it here, let's start looking a little closer before we look afield. And then we also have our conversion drilling program, which is 14,000 meters now. That was increased this year by 6,000 meters as well, which is really looking at just converting the existing resource to reserves. So in total, we're drilling 80,000 meters and currently have 11 rigs, 3 underground and 8 on surface, of which, as you stated, most of those are focused on the Nearmine. And the very exciting part of the Nearmine program is what we're seeing as we extend Fruta del Norte to the south. We drilled a hole in January 2023 in an anomaly that Kinross had actually identified. It was a gold surface anomaly that Kinross had identified but never put a hole in it. And we put that first hole and we hit mineralization. And our goal now is that we've got we formally now called it a deposit of 3 major veins that have been identified so far over a strike length of about 1.8 kilometers and running from surface, near surface to surface, down 600 meters continuous. And so we're looking now at putting out an initial resource estimate on this deposit we call Bonza Sur in Q1 or the first half of next year, hopefully Q1, and which thinking about it, first drill hole in 2023 and then boom, resource estimate in 25. I think it just shows that, that we're in the right, as we're calling it a district now versus just Fruta del Norte mine, this is a district. And we're drilling now to the southern part of FDN, like almost adjacent to the current edge of the resources, and are hitting some very significant vein systems. They're a little bit different geologically than Fruta del Norte, but very exciting in terms of grades and that sort of thing. And then we move to the east, again, the drilling to the east, to the south could all be accessed from the existing workings. And obviously, and you mentioned we're drilling at depth as well. So a lot of opportunities to really look at increasing Fruta del Norte. Bonza Sur is exciting because now we're looking at this as could it be three potential options. One is a more high grade underground operation, probably running, grades 7, 8 grams per ton, more long hole stoping versus transverse long hole stoping. That certainly is one option, but you could look at, as I mentioned, the stuff is at or near surface. Could this be more of an open pit type operation with average grades running in the 2 grams per ton? Or maybe even a little bit, drop the cutoff grade a little bit lower, a much larger open pit. And so this is a very exciting time because essentially now we're back where we were in 2015 with Fruta del Norte, now with a new potential deposit, potential mine at some point in the future to really look at, could we get production up here at Fruta del Norte from the current 500,000 ounce per year, which is pretty significant for one mine. But then look at bringing Bonza Sur on sooner, getting us up into that 700, 800,000 ounces per year range from this very small area. It's a very exciting time, and you think about it, really this exploration activities have really been only really going on now since 2021. Nearmine since 2022. What we've been able to show is that there's some phenomenal opportunities. And what's really interesting is there's a lot of geological techniques that haven't been applied that are going to help us. Like we're doing one of the first geophysical programs over top of Fruta del Norte that have been done. Because everyone, again, just got so focused on Fruta so quickly that they didn't step back and start looking at, what else is here? And now we're doing geophysics, we're doing seismic. All that is showing there's a lot of targets in this area, and it's extremely exciting times for us from just even an organic growth standpoint. We see the potential to be looking at construction of a new mill, a bigger mill. The metallurgy looks a little different at Bonza Sur, simpler. Yeah, really exciting times.
Ron, what do you think would be the approach? Let's assume there's some more success here to be comfortable with moving forward. Do you think that an open pit conventional would be a starter position and then potentially expand to underground as that gets online and things get opened up? What's the thinking there, in terms of if the goal is to see more cash flow, bigger production profile faster, or how you guys would potentially approach this? And I know this is all forward-looking subjective, but if this was viable to move forward on, what do you think would be the best course?
It's a very good question because there are, the whole thing about open pit. We are in the Amazon rainforest, one of the most biodiverse parts of the world. Do we look at an open pit? We think we can do an open pit responsibly. Based on what we're seeing today, yeah, there's a lot of forward-looking thinking here. But if we were to dream, yeah, I would say this would be an open pit operation. Constructing a new mill running that would have a throughput rate of in that 10 to 20,000 ton per day range, and yeah, and then go underground after, and then you've got even FDNS and all that as well that are going to continue to expand the mine life. We currently have a mine life at FDN of 11 years. We continue to look for FDNS and to the east. Again, do we look at just adding mine life there, or I think with the underground, with the twin declines, we've got the flexibility to maybe even increase throughput there. And then again, it's what's next with the mill. We're currently going through an expansion to go from 4,200 to 5,000 ton per day. And could we do a bit more? Yes, I think the team at site know we can. And maybe get to 5,500 ton per day, but then yeah, it's going to take some more investment in the front end and grinding and that sort of thing for us to go above that.
Talk a little bit more about that. That was one of the things I wanted to cover here, just as far as where you see timing on the process plant expansion. as far as when that would be completed. And then also just recoveries optimization. You guys are also working on bringing recoveries up even better. Talk about those two things and when you see those two milestones reached. And then also, you talked about further expansion, but what would you see logically for what you can say here, Ron? What would be the next thing you guys would be doing there to leverage the productive operations besides obviously what we just discussed about the potential for an open pit?
Yeah, I was actually just at site, Andrew. I spent the last couple of weeks there. The expansion's going well. There's kind of two phases to this $37 million project. Half of it is expansion, so we're putting in a new tailings water reclaim line, new tailings pipeline, adding a new concentrate filter, some other odds and sods around the plant to get us up to the 5,000 ton a day. That's going well. We'll actually be, I think, commissioning and tying in the new tailings pipeline in September, which will help us, start increasing throughput even potentially in September. So that's all going well. And then the other aspect, as you mentioned, is recovery improvement. I'm not personally, our team is not personally happy with where our recoveries are in these high 80s percent. We know we can do better. We've done a lot of work to determine where are we losing the gold, and it tends to be in fine sulfides. We tried grinding finer. That's sort of the natural thing. Okay, let's grind it finer and see if we can get to that gold. But with the conventional flotation cells we have, grinding finer actually hurt us, and our recoveries went down. And so we looked at the technology called Jameson cells. And what's kind of interesting is we actually considered Jameson cells in the original flow sheet, but we were trying to cut capital for a number of reasons, and we took them out. And now we're putting them back in. But I think we're putting them in a much smarter way now in terms of we know where they're going to have the biggest impact. And the foundations are all poured. We just installed one of the large pump boxes for one of the Jameson cells this past week. And so that's going well. And we anticipate with this Jameson cell technology that we will increase our recoveries by approximately 3 percentage points. And if you look at, that average grades, a percent recovery is roughly about 5,000 ounces increased production. Those 5,000 ounces are free ounces because you've covered all the costs. So that's 5,000 ounces times $2,500 an ounce. That's directly to the bottom line. And so you get 15,000. Yeah, this is a great project. It's going well. And then we are already doing the work now. We've done some work here recently of pushing the plant to see where is the next bottlenecks. There's a few things, maybe speeding up some pumps, maybe making a few changes in a couple things, but we anticipate that we can probably get to 5,500 ton per day just by debottlenecking once we've got everything in place after this expansion, all the equipment's in place. So, but then after that, yeah, we're looking at more capital, but still even going from 5,000 to 5,500 and improved recoveries is going to keep us up above, even if mine grades start to drop a little bit in the future, we'll be able to keep us in this 500,000 ounce per year producer and keep our costs down.
With those optimizations, I think you have improved production profile, and then also we should see some changes in the bottom line number a little bit too in positive fashion. I think this is the right time. You guys are in a better position now to be able to do these optimization budgeting and spending the capital required for these optimizations versus what it would have took under a much smaller company back at the early feasibility stage. Let's go ahead and construct this position. I mean, the company is so much different today. So I think some of that fine tweaking had to be done later just because of the nature of building this business. So I appreciate the comments there. I just want to highlight for the audience that's listening here. So we have a existing production profile that's increasing, becoming more efficient. Then we have the potential for additional discovery. We're replacing depletion and growing reserves. And then also there's just that larger scale exploration, district-wide exploration over the concessions that also would be ongoing. So just want to remind the audience of the various activities here that's happening for the company, just so they understand that. In a moment, I want to get into the community work and the alignment, and then, of course, government relations, and also Ecuador as an attractive jurisdiction and how you see that going forward and management of that. But first, I want to get into a term that is used in the industry sometimes. It's also used with various intents across unrelated industries, environment, amongst NGOs, and that term is sustainable mining. And for me, I look at this as a phased order of precedence items in which sustainable itself is obtained. First, that a mineral deposit must be discovered and then progressed to determine viability. Then from there, you need things like alignment and permissions to build an operation. Then if that goes well, you build and commission it. Then, of course, you have to operate it prudently to return all of those promises to those whom commitments were made before. And then, of course, there needs to be rewards and incentives for getting this far, which to me is that sustainable milestone. And then, of course, from here, you need to do more heavy lifting to ensure the operations are sustaining for decades to make sure it has maximum impact for everybody involved, including local government, local community. So the work really never stops to keep it sustainable, in my view. And of course, you want to do that for as long as possible. Then, of course, you've got reclamation, closure, all while preparing to transition for all those involved to carry on their experience, careers, and community in other ways of post-closure. So, to me, I think this is a fairly simple characterization of sustainable mining, at least from my desk. Others might think of it, Ron, as sustainable mining from a standpoint of an environmental angle, or to take only what you need, that kind of thought process. But my position is that a lot of effort, resources, people, right decisions, and technical expertise, and a lot of capital, underscoring on that, goes into making the conversation about sustainable even possible. So, Ron, what does sustainable mining mean to you? Because you've actually done this.
The way you've actually defined it, Andrew, is excellent. It truly is all those facets that you've just laid out. And for us, sustainable mining has varied a little bit. When we first got down there, it was a lot of education about what sustainable, or we also term it responsible mining means. Ecuadorians, this is the first mine in Ecuador. And a lot of what Ecuadorians were exposed to was artisanal or small scale or illegal mining. And tremendous environmental degradation. It's just a horrible situation. And then originally we were saying large scale mining, and they're used to small scale. They were thinking, oh my gosh, this could be 1,000 times worse. So that's why we've kind of more the, as you use your term, sustainable or responsible mining, is to show no, mining can be done with the protection of the environment, with creating wealth for all levels of government, and working safely, and ensuring that local communities are benefiting. So for us during construction, you mentioned a lot of capital. Yeah, we spent close to 10 million on training as part of construction, because where we're at in Zamora Chinchipe, there was no mines, and it was mostly sustainable agriculture. And so we had to train a lot of people to be process operators, mine operators, etc., in order to be part of our employees. And now 50% of our employees are from that province of Zamora Chinchipe, and 90% of our employees are from Ecuador. But it's also too, and as we go into operations, it's again now it becomes more a broader training, to help people continue to progress in their careers, working with universities, University of Loja, which is not that far away, fantastic geology program, working with them on their engineering programs. We've got lots of opportunities there to really make changes in people's lives in the part of Zamora Chinchipe as a result of the development of Fruta del Norte. And, I remember one of the first meetings that we had with the government, with Lucas Lundin. He said, they said, well, mining and oil, it's all natural resources, it's the same. And he said, no, mining is different. Mining creates much broader impact across various levels of the economy, both local, changing, creating a lot more jobs in oil, paying our taxes, etc. And there's two mines now operating. There's a Chinese operation just to the north of us. It's a copper open pit, and ourselves. And we're in the top 10, the two of us, in terms of paying taxes. It would be 2023 taxes. We were in the top. Well, last 3 years we've been in the top 10 in terms of taxpayers in the country. And then creating the provinces of Marchichipe has seen a significant decrease in the level of poverty in that province, to the point where it's the only province that's really seen a marked decrease in poverty levels over the last 5 years in the country. Yansatsa, the canton that we're in, is one of the most dynamic. It's seen its budgets increase because of income and that's had. When we first got there, it was 11 million. Now it's $36 million a year in terms of income that they're seeing and things they're doing. Improving infrastructure, improving services, hospitals, etc., for the local community. Sustainable mining has such a huge impact, and when it's done right, it changes, as we say, we change people's lives. It's been part of the Lundin culture. Next year, I've worked for the family for 30 years. I'm on my third generation of the Lundin family. Unfortunately, Adolf and Lucas both were taken from us too early by cancer. It's been part of the culture of the Lundin Group from the very start. I remember when I first started working for the family, we talked about what everyone talks about, ESG now, using those letters, but that was part of our culture going back 30 years ago. And it's been a big part of our success and why Lundin Gold's been so successful in Ecuador.
Very good points, Rod. I really appreciate your thoughts on this. And yeah, I wanted just to make it clear that there's a lot to think of in those two words, whether it's responsible mining or sustainable mining. Pick one. Sustainable, I look at more of along the lines of how much longevity can we get out of that? That's how I look at it. And then, of course, there's all those pieces. And the important piece here that I think some folks have to understand that they may not have fully thought through is that in order to become and have a conversation about sustainable practices, environmental protection, environmental enhancement, progressive reclamation, all of these things first need the capital return in order to execute them. So in other words, leave the site better than when you arrived. And that is always the goal. And so, I think that that's important to delineate all those components that come in. And there's a lot of moving parts here, Ron. And of course, you've looked at this over your entire career, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the new buzzword out there, which our office refuses to use, but ESG, these things already have existed just in good business practice. Sometimes the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. If it ain't broke, don't fix it type mentality. Of course, there's preventative maintenance, of course, but those types of things I think are important for people to understand. And I think you guys have put out a role model in Ecuador that would have to be at the top of the list, to me anyway. So appreciate the comments there. And with that, I just want to tie it in. You've already talked a little bit about some of the community work, and you guys are doing a lot on this, and you could probably talk all afternoon about this. But just briefly, maybe some of the more recent local community work that the company has been doing, anything on that front you want to mention that was interesting to you at the recent site visit, or things that you guys have come up with recently?
Thank you. Really, that means a lot, Andrew, what you said about what we're doing and sustainability. That means a lot. Thank you. I think the thing with the community, I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to take the Jack and Adam Lundin and their wives and their mother to Fruta del Norte. She had never been there before. Jack worked for us through construction, so he had been there recently. He's also chairman of the board. Adam had not been since 2016, when we were before construction even started. And we spent the first day in the community on that site visit. And there were times when you looked around and you saw, we spent a lot of time looking at programs we have with the youth because a lot of the issues, as our Juan Jose told us, a lot of the challenges in these small towns in Ecuador is alcoholism, teenage pregnancy, violence, all these types of things. So we've worked with a NGO out of Mexico, acronym is EPC, to create a lot of programs for children to be able to be busy after school or whatever, or even after school or during the summer. You know, soccer, basketball, boxing, dance, music, English training. You know, and then we have also some programs to help with their, you know, kids that are in high school to prepare for the university entrance exams. And to see those children, you know, all have out playing, but really structured playing and getting better. We found out now in terms of boxing, we've got a couple children from Los Encuentros that are competing nationally now in boxing, and similarly, some young soccer players are moving up in the ranks with regards to within the national leagues being looked at by the leagues within Ecuador. And these are kids that never ever would have believed that. You know, we've seen we have a program that we also focus on mental well-being, not only for our employees, but also in the community. And what was really interesting is we met three of the psychologists they go out into local communities. They have their office in Los Encuentros, but they also will go into communities and I think each of them had well over 100 or so clients, people that they're seeing right now that have can be anywhere from domestic violence to just depression or whatever, but we're helping children and adults. This is adults. What the one psychologist, she had her patients went from 16 to 90 years old. And what was really kind of neat was three of the four are from Los Encuentros and Yansatsa. When we first got there, we were helping students to prepare for the high school education, for the university entrance exams. These three students all went through that program. We also help a little bit through university with some living expenses and that for kids that get into university. They were all part of that program. And now they're back in Los Encuentros as trained clinical psychologists helping in their community. So you talk about sustainability. There's a perfect example of programs now that are improving the lives of people within the community by helping these young people be able to pursue the careers they wanted to. And then we went from seeing all these programs to then meeting a bunch of ladies. We have a program that we actually work with the Lundin Foundation and the U.S. Embassy called Soy Emprendedora. I'm a businesswoman. And we met 6 of the graduates of this program who now have their own small businesses, ranging from one that's a textiles company that makes a lot of our clothing now for site, through to a craft beer shop, chocolate, various goods and services. A lot of it agricultural oriented, where they were born and raised on the farm, and they are taking that now, and we're helping them to be able to produce their product, improve the things they need to be able to sell that product within Ecuador and internationally. To see these young ladies now have a business and a dream was really moving. So it's not all just about the mine. It's about how we can help as a company to improve the lives of the communities that we impact, and to help. Not everyone can work at the mine, but how can we help people? And to see these ladies, they're now have dreams, and some of them are doing very well from when I first met them, now selling their chocolate bars and organic chocolate and that they're doing internationally from a small farm just outside of Los Encuentros. It was really, really rewarding. And it just shows what, again, as you say, sustainable mining can do.
Ron, thank you for the details on that. Just lots to discuss here, but I'll try to keep it concise in that I think this highlights a lot of opportunities and a lot of creativity that you guys have been able to do. And that also over the life of this mine as it currently stands, which we know or it's going to increase, and that this is going to be multi-decade operation, that during those decades you're able to create all of these assist in the creation of these other industries because they're needed for the operation or that they're supplementary to the community and to the country, local community, etc. And so therefore, when the mine is closed in the future and reclamation occurs, that you've built a industry around that operation that is not necessarily dependent upon just the mine anymore, and that it's selling its goods and services within the country and exporting, et cetera. So I think that's really where sustainable comes back, responsible. Those terms come back and really fill in really well here. So I appreciate you sharing some of the initiatives on this. And it's obviously an ongoing, never ending process as long as that mine's in operation and a long time yet to go here. So I'm excited to see those future initiatives and those objectives be met as we continue to progress. And all of this is possible again because this thing is now cash flowing. It's been paid back and things are moving forward. And so that's what I really like about this whole idea. And there's not a lot of good comparable industries. I mean, there's a few, but let's just put it this way. I like to say this often from our desk is, you're not going to get there just by having a bird watching industry. Bird watching is not going to cut it. I mean, it's great, it's fun, but it's not going to cut it. And so that's, I think, where this is really important, and that mining globally is very important to overall sustainability because it provides raw materials for everything that we have. So I think it's fairly simple in that context to understand. Just with respect to government, Ron, what is your position on the future welcoming of the extractive industry in Ecuador? And of course, the government's ability to see through and also sort out, there's good NGOs out there, but there's also a lot of bad NGOs that desire to kind of disrupt the government friendliness and policies towards segments like mining. You've been in the country, you've dealt with Ecuador for a long period of time, you've seen governments come and go. How do you see the outlook there? And do you think that this is a destination that will continue to be friendly to mining?
That's a great question because it has ebbed and flowed over the last, since we've been there. Well, next year will be 10 years. Korea, our first government that was there, was very supportive of mining. The last two weren't anti-mining, but they weren't necessarily supportive. So it was luckily for us, we had all our financing in place, construction. We just went ahead and did things. But it's been challenging for the other projects that are in the country to really move forward. We had a change in government in late last year, November. We had a change in government. A fellow by the name of Daniel Noboa is our current president. Really interesting young man, 36 years old. He's had been in the National Assembly. His father had actually ran for president several times. He had to focus first on security because we had some issues, which many of your listeners probably had heard about. And he's done a very good job at getting on top of that. That's going to take some time, but we've seen definite improvements in the security situation in Ecuador. We never had any issues with Fruta del Norte, but there were issues on the coast. But he's now also getting supportive of mining. And he attended the PDAC conference earlier this year. We've seen two projects now move forward with their permitting process and that, where one of them, I believe, is going to be moving forward to start construction shortly, which is very positive. We're coming up, but we'll have to have another election in February next year, and he's well ahead in the polls. His government has taken the time. We've actually had more visits from his government at Fruta del Norte in the last year than we had in the previous 5 years. So they're getting a chance firsthand to see full circle what we talk about sustainable and responsible mining, what it means. We actually just had 10 members of the National Assembly at site last week, all from different parties. They all left that saying that they all consider themselves now to be ambassadors of responsible mining in Ecuador. This government, I think, is starting to see what we had said 10 years ago, the impact on mining when done responsibly. they're also seeing the impact of mining when it's done illegally, and it's the significant environmental impact. So they need to get a handle on that. And one of the ways to do that is to support responsible mining. And I think this government right now, Andrew, it's very exciting times. And I think we're showing with our exploration efforts the work that many other companies are doing in Ecuador. There's tremendous geological potential in the country overall. I think this is some very exciting times for the development of this industry in Ecuador over the next several years.
That's good information. Good to get some various views on how this goes here. We've seen some challenges, and again, I think you and I have discussed this in the past, is there are outside influences on these countries as well to stifle policy or change things or drive away from self-determination, away from sovereignty. It's good to see countries like Ecuador, who have been, quite wealthy oil and gas wise, start to transition and diversify into further extractive industries, and how important that is for the economy, and how that can help grow a society and also put a society on the right path towards those proper understandings, expertise, talent, skills, competency, of which we need in a lot of places. So really appreciate that, and always excited to see what happens next there. And I think good companies that are doing good operations there, like Lundin Gold, is very useful as an example for the government to follow, because we also see other challenges in other jurisdictions from time to time. And we're hoping some of those will be resolved as well in some of these regions that really need to have mining as part of their baseline economics. It's super important because some of these countries are at a disadvantage. They don't have the ability to do other industries. And there's the island nation analogy. There is the certain countries just don't have the size, they don't have the right location, the right weather, the right things to be able to do other things. So it's very much important to look at this and take advantage of what you can on an economic basis, and provide opportunity and employments for the society, the citizenry, because obviously that's very important. Otherwise, you resort to things that probably result in degradation of societies and more crimes and these types of things. So there's a lot to talk about there, but really appreciate how you guys are approaching this, and of course your experience of the situation there and how you guys are dealing with it. So I really appreciate that. Well, Ron, short of any comments to close up on your side, I'd like to leave it there for now and just leave you with this question. As we continue to progress in this cycle, for potential investors who are listening in, Lundin Gold has a market capitalization of about 6.5 billion Canadian dollars. Why should the company be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this point in time?
It can be summed up real quickly. We're in a phenomenal opportunity with regards to the gold market. We've talked about, I think that we're going to be seeing gold prices continue to rise. I've seen many projections of $3,000 per ounce that we could be seeing here in the very near future. And we are one of the mines that's generating significant free cash flow today at $2,500 per ounce. The growth profile that we have in front of us with regards to our organic growth, our exploration, supportive shareholders that will enable us to pursue disciplined M&A opportunities, which will create shareholder value. This is, I think, very exciting times for our shareholders to be part of Lundin Gold, plus having that return of capital already there that's sustainable, whether gold prices fall or, we'll look at that. That's something that we can sustain, whether we do M&A, further growth, whatever, that dividend is sustainable. So a lot of opportunities, I think, for growth, return of capital, and in a very exciting gold price environment.
Very much so. You attract the demographic of those income investors, dividend investors, but then also they're getting not only that, they're getting the growth. They're getting the upside in what you guys are doing, which is company specific events that you guys can generally control really well. So really appreciate that, Ron, and good opportunity here. And there's a bunch of growth ahead of us, at least in my opinion. And how can parties who are interested contact the company?
Best way to contact us is contact Finlay Heppenstall. He's our Director of Corp Dev and IR at finlay.heppenstall@lundingold.com. And also there is access on our website at lundingold.com. There's an info button there that you click there, and that also goes directly to us, and we'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Ron, thank you for that. It's always a pleasure to talk and get an update on Lundin Gold. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure.